Hello and welcome BitMonger family, JMonger here, and in today's video we're going to look at the Filipina Pea. She made a video called The Naked Truth About Age Gap Relationships in the Philippines, and I have to say she is one smart cookie. She's a smart girl, and she gives probably the best argument that I've ever heard in terms of, why these massive age gaps, you see them often in the Philippines. And she equates it to the culture, and she also equates the differences in views between foreigners and Filipinos through a cultural lens. And on a certain level, I would agree with her on some of the things she says. Like I said, she makes some very strong arguments here. But in today's video, I'm going to, question her ideas, tries to support them with her rationale. And at the end, I'm going to pose questions towards her, asking some questions that I would be interested to know on how she would reply to them. So let's go ahead and get into it, guys.
Ultimately, you realize you can't put a mathematical equation to it or a one-size-fits-all rule. Like most things, it's completely subjective. All we can do is make a law to determine what's legal and leave the moral judgments to the individual. As long as you're talking about two legal adults, it's really up to the people involved, right?
Okay, so on that first point that she makes there about, being an adult. Okay, I can agree with that on a certain level, but let's not forget the human mind is not fully developed until they are in their early 20s, okay? And a lot of women and men at that young age are really not capable of making good decisions. Okay? Can't dismiss that. Let's continue.
I suspect. And how is it different here compared to where you come from? Well, aside from the moral issue, let's look at the practical aspects. According to a recent survey of 3,000 Americans, people with a gap of 10 years were 39% more likely to split up compared to couples who were closer in age. And a 20-year age gap increased the failure rate to 95%. That's some pretty strong evidence against age gaps. But that research was conducted in the West, where societal pressure might have a lot to do with the added friction. When everyone's staring at you with looks of silent disapproval, it can take a toll in your relationship. But does the same situation exist in the Philippines? Actually, no, it doesn't. The truth is, if you're walking around with a much older foreigner, chances are that the only looks you'll be getting are jealous ones.
Okay, those statistics are kind of shocking, but to assume that those don't cross cultures, to dismiss that a large age gap where people are in their life will not impact that relationship, is being completely dismissive and in denial. A guy that's in his late 40s or 50s or 60s, heaven forbid 70s, and is getting involved with a woman in her 20s is not going to have much in common. Now, why would the people would be jealous of something like that? Well, we'll get into that part later. Let's go on to the next video, and we will see what she has to say.
But the most common objection I hear about age gaps involves a lack of shared interests and common goals. I mean, what could a man in his 50s possibly have in common with a woman in her 20s? Doesn't a younger woman want to go out bar hopping and dancing with her friends? At an age where a much older man might be perfectly content just watching the sunset with his woman by his side, wouldn't that be considered boring as hell by his younger mates? If you immediately answer yes, it's probably because you're thinking like a Westerner again. Most Filipinas, the good ones anyway, don't want to party till the sun comes up. We learned long ago to appreciate the simple things, and our version of happiness is spending time with our partner, whether it's sitting out on a patio or watching a movie together. We rarely feel the need to be doing something exciting all the time because it's not something we're used to anyway. And those of you with Filipino partners know what I'm talking about.
Okay, I mean, she does have a point there. To think that there's shared common interests between a young Filipino, things that they can identify with and compared to like an old Western man, is just being completely dismissive. There's nothing going on there, guys. There just isn't, okay? And why are they so content on living the simple life? Well, it's probably because they don't got money, right? They're not used to having any kind of disposable cash. So, yeah, sitting on their ass, drinking a milk tea, doing things uber cheap and more luxurious life, it's just not an option. All right, let's go to the next part. She does mention about how older women might fit into that same category, and I would agree on a certain level with that. Younger, old, ignorant is ignorant, knowledge is knowledge. If they don't have knowledge, well then, and they're ignorant, well then there's going to be less to talk about. And honestly, guys, if you enjoy being that mentor and having to explain everything to a woman, if that makes you feel good, okay, I guess so. You know, personally, I get tired of having to explain everything to a woman. It's just it gets tiring. Rather than having engagement and a nice conversation, you're playing teacher all the time, and that gets old, guys. That gets old.
The other potential compatibility issue involves the question of children. Filipinos typically want to have kids, especially if they don't already have any from a previous relationship. Now, depending on the guy and what stage of life he's at, this can admittedly be a problem, but I've found that most mixed couples get around it. Some guys make it clear from the start that kids are out of the question. Some don't mind having a child or two. And I've talked with several men who say they'll give their younger wife a child as a parting gift before the final curtain.
Okay. And she makes a very good point here. You really need to communicate well with these ladies and find out what their expectations are and their goals. And like she says, a lot of these women will want to have kids, and that's fine. However, the last part that she just said, if you're a really old guy and you're having a kid with a young woman when you're in your late 50s or 60s, I find that absolutely irresponsible. You know, how are you going to play with your kids if you're not fit? And if you likely die and leave the kid as a so-called kind of reminder for her, what the fuck, man? You're leaving unless you're really wealthy and can leave them a lot of money to ensure that they're going to be taken care of, I find it absolutely irresponsible. That's just my belief. I think if you're an older guy, 60s and up, even late 50s, I would say, don't have kids, man. Just don't do it. It's you want to be there for your kids. You want to see them graduate from high school, right? Preferably even, walk your daughter down the aisle. Don't do it, guys. Just don't. All right, let's look at the next piece here.
And what about the advantages for the younger woman? Well, the most obvious one is the financial benefit and having the peace of mind to know where the next meal is coming from. That's actually a concern here. So looking for a relationship that ensures a roof over your head is a practical consideration, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay. And that, to me, right, what she just said right there is the whole meat of this story, guys. And this is where you need to kind of determine what it really is about. If her big motivation is about money, security, escaping poverty, if that's her main objective, you need to question whether or not this is sincere love. So if the woman's main goal is to gain security, you need to really question whether or not this is true love or whether she's just using you to escape her miserable situation. And P, this is what I would say to you. All those Filipinos are jealous of this young woman. Is that because why? It's about money. And if you dismiss that, that's a shame. And another thing that I would like to add, having lived in the Philippines and seen the foreign men, especially American men that it attracts, I would argue this whole idea of them being wise and wisdom, well-read, and all this type of stuff is bullshit. Most of the guys that I see over there are not well-educated. The reason why they move there is because it's cheap and they can't afford it because they probably weren't successful back at home. Okay? And so that whole idea just kind of just goes right out the window. Now, are they well educated and have more knowledge than the average Filipino? Probably, because your school systems suck. Most of the Filipinos I met, they didn't even know that the name the Philippines comes from King Philip of Spain. They don't even know their own history. So I suppose they might have some sort of knowledge there that they can offer. But let's face it, if the motivating factor is all around money, you got to question whether or not this woman is sincere. And if it's just about money, fuck it, you might as well just pay for them and not marry them. Because money doesn't buy love. Okay, P. So the final thing that I would like to know is this, and hopefully you reply to me and you're honest. Tell me this. Do you believe if the Philippines was a developed economy and wasn't so corrupt, and the women there had social upward mobility, where they could get good jobs through education, there wasn't any kind of nepotism, which is rife in the Philippines, and they actually had opportunities in life to make a living, do you think these young women, would be going with these old, saggy-ass foreign men? That is a question that I would like to know. And you want to know what I think? I think they would not. I think this whole thing would be tipped on its head and be seen for what it is, which is all about money, guys. It's all about the money, okay? And for this reason alone, I strongly recommend all of you men out there, all of you Western men out there that are just thinking about marrying a Filipino woman, is you spend a long time with getting to know her. Don't show your money. Be very frugal and try to really determine whether or not this is true love, or if she is just going with you for your money. Now, I can tell you right now, guys, a lot of these women are just going for the money. And it is clearly obvious. If you think otherwise, well, then you're either in denial or you're just stupid. Okay, well, that's my piece there. I'm sure what I have to say might be controversial, but that's okay. All right, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful day, and monger on.